the SportsRap Podcast, and we are now going to delve into our NBA Sixers talk to ride this thing out to as close as 1 o'clock as possible. And like I said, I understand the weather is what it is. So if you have to come out once again, come out, check on the elderly. But if you have to come out on your own, take your time, be careful. It is nasty out. It's not real crazy, but it's nasty, and it's started snowing again. And it's kind of like a mixture because I hear it tapping on the window. So it's like kind of a snowy, rainy mixture. So just be careful, be safe if you have to come out, and take your time and get your things done if you need to come out. So we move into our Sixers talk. Again, thanks to everybody that tuned in this morning earlier on the first part of the podcast with the Eagles talk. Chuck, thanks for chiming in. Tay, thanks for chiming in. Ivan, tune in. Omar Phillips, Leslie Cuff, Daryl Oliver. There was another name I forget, and I apologize. I should have written it down, but hope you guys come back because you know where we are. Facebook, SportsRap Podcast is the group, and I'm here right now. We're going to talk some Sixers. We're going to initially start with the NBA. And I gave you some scores earlier. And I gave you one score in particular. Score 146, 149. Now, just take a minute and walk with me for a second. That was the Nets and the Wizards. The Nets lose that game 146, 149. Now, mind you, they were without one of their big three. They did not have James Harden yesterday. Nonetheless, I'm doing this for a point, just to make a statement, because I just feel like since I've been doing this over the past, that if this was the Sixers, that it would be all over the news talking about how they lost. And I'm going back to the first time, the 145-point game that they gave up to Cleveland, and they lost those two games to Cleveland. Now, I'm sure there are going to be bandwagoners that will chime in or want to chime in and say, well, they didn't have this person, they didn't have that person, yada, yada, yada. You can't really give me that. You can't sell me that. The Sixers, like I said, when they lost that game to Cleveland, they didn't have Joel Embiid. I didn't make that as an excuse. I felt like they took that team for granted. And they felt like it was a team that they should just go in there and beat, with or without Joel Embiid. And those guys had nothing to lose, and they beat them. Same or very similar situation with Cleveland and the Brooklyn Nets, who beat them twice, as far as Cleveland beating the Nets twice. Now, we all get into the age of this new big three and these super teams in the NBA, yada, yada, yada. The initial thoughts were, when the signings were made, that Kevin Durant was going to be with Brooklyn, and then with the Nets, and then Kyrie being there too. There's a lot of chatter about them immediately coming out of the East. Carlos, the enforcer, thanks for tuning in. Somewhat making slight of the fact of what Milwaukee did last year. And I only say that because Milwaukee was the number one team for the better part of the season last season. Although they didn't have the success that they hoped for, but they were the number one team pretty much throughout the season. So now you have this monster team, and it ties in because there was a lot of rumors about the trade for James Harden, which ended up being to the Nets, and they gave up, excuse my language, they gave up a shitload, which I think they still gave up too much. The Nets are where they are. I'm not going to say they're struggling. I'm not going to say they're not. But I will say, as a Sixers fan and what I've been seeing from the Sixers team, they don't really scare me. I understand who they have on their roster, understand their roster makeup. But when you get to that big three and you get past that big three, there's not much there. Their defense is porous at best, if you will, meaning their defense is not really good. Okay, so they will have to try and outscore you. Again, as a Sixers fan and the current state of the Sixers, they don't scare me. Okay, it is what it is. And we got them coming up this week. So another test for my young, spry Sixers, who, by the way, are the number one seed in the East right now. Sitting with a record of, 15-6 right now? Yeah, 15-6 right now. They have moved up one place from fourth last week to this week being third on the power rankings, only behind the two teams from LA that share the same building, the Clippers, the Lakers, Sixers. In that order, those are the top three teams in the current ESPN power rankings right now. So getting back to the Brooklyn Nets, just briefly, and I'm sure once this video goes up later and people see it, that there are people that want to have some comments. I wish that they were in right now so I could get the comments as I'm giving mine. But you've got three guys on a team who were coming from teams where they were the man on those particular teams. So in basketball, most sports, it's only one ball. So it's going to take some soul searching, some ego workings to get them to be a cohesive unit and decide on particular nights who's going to take the last shot, who's going to get the last shot or whatever. But last night, they lost to the Washington Wizards, who ironically have the worst record in the Eastern Conference. And I'm sure, again, like I mentioned just a couple seconds ago, a lot of bandwagoners are going to say, oh, well, they didn't have their third wheel. But you had two of them that are averaging close to 30. So you figure that's 60 points. Okay? So basically, in an NBA game, you figure on an average, you could just dumb it down somewhat, 25 points a quarter, 100 points a game. You got two players getting 60. So you mean to tell me the rest of your team, professional basketball players, pay to play, can't get 40 points and get you 100 points? I was just being devil's advocate, hypothetically speaking there, playing with some numbers. But they lose on two back-to-back three-point shots very, very late in the fourth quarter in that game, which tells me that something going on there. So this, and of course, I've seen it. The defense, they gave up 149 points, okay, to the Wizards. They also gave up 145 to the Cavs. Now, there's been a flop. Gloria Jones, thanks for tuning in. That there's been a flop in those two teams. Usually, it would be the other way around, where the Wizards would be somewhere in the playoff hunt and Cleveland would not be. But that's, for some reason, the way that Cleveland is playing, that's been flipped right now. Cleveland is somewhere in the playoff mix, if you will. The playoffs started today or whatever. And again, like I mentioned, the Wizards pretty much had the worst record in the Eastern Conference. So for you to have this big three, all these expectations of being the so-called hands-on favorite to come out of the East this year, you gave up 150 points, almost 150 points to two teams that ironically or ideally would not make a lot of noise in the playoffs right now. One of them wouldn't be in. One of them, I think, would just be getting in, just barely making it in. So, again, my point in bringing that up and including that in my Sixers talk is the fact that if that were the Sixers, like it had been last year, there was a lot of constant talk with the way the roller coaster season went last year, and then ultimately culminating with them being swept out of the playoffs in the bubble by the Boston Celtics, their nemesis, who they beaten twice already this year. If it had been the Sixers who had given up 145 points to the Wizards, or who, by the way, played the Sixers tough earlier this year, or Cleveland, who actually beat the Sixers earlier this year, there would be nonstop talk about how this team needs to do this team needs to do that, this team needs to break up, this and that and the other. Is it the coaching? Is it this? Is Joel still in shape? Is Ben still going to get traded? It would be a plethora of chatter about them if the Sixers were in that position. But again, with what I mentioned about Brett Brown and the coaching staff, and again, I think Brett Brown was a good coach, just not the coach for this particular group to succeed to the best of their abilities. Accountability. You can see it when you watch Sixers games now that the players have bought in. The players are listening to coaches. Coaches are getting on players when they make mistakes. And there's no discrimination, if you will, for lack of a better word. It's whoever. I heard a press conference the other day where Doc Rivers says, I have Sam Cassell handling Ben. Ben makes a turnover. Sam Cassell is on his you-know-what. Okay? And that needs to be for the young players, the guys that want to be successful. You now have a coaching staff who were successful as players in the NBA. It showed yesterday in that fourth quarter, but they went on like a 24 or 31-3 run to come back and win that game. To a team that always plays this tough. Without Joel, Ben Simmons has stepped up. And I saw something else this morning where it was a little marker, and this is probably going to lead me into another topic of the Sixers situation, where Ben ended up with 21 points last night. He was very aggressive, stepped up when Joel was out and needed to. So did Tobias Harris, who right now, in my opinion, is arguably an all-star candidate, the way he's been playing. I mentioned way back when Doc was hired and people asked about Tobias, I mentioned that Tobias was having his best season under Doc Rivers in L.A. before he was traded to the Sixers. So now they're reunited and looks like he's getting back to some of that form. I mean, he hit a game winner for us against the Lakers. And then he steps up again last night to help beat the Pacers. Ben Simmons, like I mentioned last week, a lot of people had traded, and there's still a lot of talk. I saw one this morning where this was a proposed trade with the Washington Wizards. The Sixers would get Bradley Beal. The Wizards would get Ben Simmons and Korkmaz. I really don't like that because Bradley Beal is not a point guard. Then the Sixers don't actually have a point guard. But I don't feel like you need to move Ben now. And people are always arguing, and people are still going to talk about, because of the way the league has changed now, him shooting the three-point shot. Again, for the umpteenth time, people, I am not really concerned with him shooting a three-point shot as of now. I think that could come later on down the line in his career. I am beginning to be happy with what I've seen so far in the last few games. Free throw shooting has starting to get better. He's being more aggressive, going to the basket. Again, I still would like him to shoot that foul line extended, that mid-range jump shot. Still looking for that, and I think that will help him a whole lot and help the other players on the team immensely. But I think he does so many other things so well for this team that it would not be a smart move to move him right now. Okay? So those are my thoughts on all the Ben Simmons talking to trade. I like what is going on with the Sixers right now. Like I said, they're number one seed in the Atlantic Division, tops in the East right now, number 3 in the overall NBA power rankings. They beat their nemesis twice, Boston. They beat them twice already. Got a little lackadaisical, if you will, the other night against the Lakers. But they are beginning to do what good teams do. They found a way to win. They ended up getting another shot against the Lakers. Tobias Harris takes that shot and hits it and wins that game. And then they buck down and come back and play some tough D and pull this game out last night. I think that the Sixers are definitely on the right track. And I don't really feel like there needs to be any trades right now. I still think that we need a veteran point guard, a veteran old school run the show point guard. And I bring this up as I brought it up the other day to a couple friends because of going back to that Lakers game at that one particular moment where we were up 16 late in that game And then like in a 2 to 3 minute game time span, it ended up being an 8-point lead. I think if we had that general or traditional point guard that could have played in that role, take the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands and let him motivate or operate against a smaller player and not have to worry about handling or setting people up where he could play freewheeling, would have helped, and it wouldn't have gotten down to the Lakers taking the lead and then us having to have a shot to get back and win that game. So I think that's what we're missing. And I'm thinking that maybe somewhere down the line in free agency, they can pick somebody up or something without a trade. I would really love to see how far this team, the way it's put together right now, could go on this playoff run with this new coaching staff who is doing a phenomenal job right now. You've got Joel Embiid very much now in the talk for MVP of the league. I think he is definitely the or one of the highest front runners right now. I think, again, like I mentioned last week, I feel like he has gotten it. I feel like the light switch has come on finally for him. In my opinion, he's in the best shape that he has been in since he's been in the NBA. I think he is becoming more astute with his basketball IQ. I think he's making better basketball decisions. I think he's beginning to get better passing out of the double teams. And I like the fact that he is noticing when he can dominate games and he is taking control over games at certain points when he needs to. So that, my friends, is a beautiful thing for the Sixers right now. And like I said, I saw some quotes that I want to talk about real quick. I saw something where Daryl Morey, the Sixers' new president, has said that it's pretty much championship or bust this season. I don't know. I don't really know if I agree with that completely. And I give that, and I say that on a curve because you've brought in new key players. You've brought in an entire new coaching staff. So I don't really think that championship or bust is the issue right now. I'm looking forward to a deeper run in the playoffs than last year. So I don't really agree with the championship or bust this season for the Sixers right now. I would love to see how far this group can get and then see if we can run it back or see what's needed on the next run to push us over the top. And we know NBA is February now, so we know there's always going to be trade rumors. And one of the most recent talk is about the Pelicans looking to move Lonzo Ball or JJ Redick. The focus from the Pelicans as far as JJ Redick is moving him to a Northeast team, which is his liking because his family lives in Brooklyn. The names of those teams are the Sixers, the Nets, and the Celtics. So I don't think there is a legit spot for him on the Celtics right now. I don't know how or where he would fit in with the Nets right now. And even for that matter, with this team, the Philadelphia 76ers, not 100% sure where he would fit in right now and what the Pelicans would be wanting in return in trade offers for JJ. So if I'm the Sixers, of course, I do my due diligence. I listen to see what they have to say. But I kind of stay away from that right now. I mean, after all, the guy left for more money, went to a team. He didn't make the playoffs for the first time in his career. He could have stayed and been part of what we have going on right now. But could it spell that his career is coming towards that downward spiral? Not so much a spiral, but on that downward trek. I saw that post, and I saw a lot of people were like, no, they didn't want him back. He left us for more money, yada, yada, yada. I get that as far as a fan, but, I only think you make a move to bring in another shooter like him back if it's for the right price. And I also understand that there have been trades and possibilities of trades talked about that were presented that Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey, who have a very good relationship, Doc Rivers has backed those down and shut those down because he knows what he wants and he sees what he has on this roster and what he can do possibly with this team. So I think in that right, you have to kind of let him do what he does rather, and push this team to get to where they need to be. I think the combination of Ben and Joel is getting better. I also saw something that said that people think that the Sixers might be under the radar. I would have went with that up until that Lakers game, that they were, flying under the radar. But I think the Lakers game and last night's game and the way they had to fight and they beat Boston twice already is a message that, people have taken notice to, and they realize that right now I don't consider them under the radar. You had LeBron mention that there was a really good team that he had played Friday night. He also mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing, that there's going to be a lot of good teams in the East that are going to be fighting for playoff spots, jockeying for position. And he said that the Sixers are going to definitely be one of those teams when it all boils down to it. So, excuse me. So, again, I definitely like what's going on here. And again, it depends on what the asking price is and what we get in return as far as trades. But I really don't see anything right now that will say, I can say immediately once that trade is done, we'll say, oh yeah, they're definitely over the top. I don't really see any moves like that right now as of yet. So again, like I said, maybe some players will not get traded. Maybe some players will get bought out, get waived, released, and then the Sixers could pick somebody up for the second half of the season. Again, like I said, I think the only thing that we're missing is that veteran point guard that can play some situational, veteran, traditional point guards minutes for us, and help this team along the way. But all in all, I am very, very excited and very happy with what is going on with the Philadelphia 76ers right now. And I think it just needs to be left alone. Let's ride this wave and see where it takes us. And like I said, then we evaluate and we'll know what we need to add or subtract and do to get us over the top if we don't get over the top or whatever. I am looking forward to, again, like I mentioned, a deep run in the playoffs, definitely not getting swept. I'm hoping that we can stay towards the top three of the half. And like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with Brooklyn. Again, I said it, Brooklyn doesn't really scare me because their defense is bad. The Milwaukee Bucks don't scare me. Big guy, Branch, what's going on? The Bucks don't scare me. So I think there's very good opportunities for the Sixers to stay at the top of the East. Miami is beginning to get some things back together. They've been a little bit lackadaisical or whatever, or a little in a rut without Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler has returned. So that's probably going to help them a lot. But I also still see we beat them already too, and it was without Jimmy. And I said, people, so my guy Branch says the Sixers still need a stretch four. I could get along with that too, Branch. But again, like I said, the way that these guys are playing right now, the way they're being coached, it depends on what the asking price is. Because you know how it goes, Branch. You got teams that are playing pretty good. So you've got pieces that work in your system and they're showing their talents. So teams are going to definitely ask about particular pieces that their current team may seem unwilling to part with, like a Tyrese Maxey, a Matisse Thybulle. In their own right on this team, they have their niche and they're doing it and they're performing in their niche. So it'll be very hard for a coach like Doc Rivers to want to let those guys go, to arguably get or possibly get a JJ Redick, like I said, who's on the somewhat decline in his career, or get a player that's on an expiring contract for a rental fee for half of a season that might just walk away. So it's going to be interesting to see what those guys talk about in the front office and how they feel about progressing along with the team. But all in all, I am impressed. I'm very excited about the Philadelphia 76ers right now. And we'll see what happens down the line, folks. Wrapping up, I am now going to give you some scores, well, not scores, some schedules for tonight in the sports world. I got some NHL schedules for you, some NCAA schedule, and some Monday night NBA games. So here we go. We're going to go with the NHL first. You got the Panthers are at the Rangers. The Bruins are at the Capitals. The Predators will face off against the Lightning. The Canucks will take on the Canadiens. The Flames are going up against the Jets, and the Golden Knights are in San Jose to face off against the Sharks. And Big Monday in NCAA basketball, you got Georgia Tech going up against number 25 Louisville. Oregon faces off against number 23 UCLA. To Rest Bandy, thanks for tuning in. You got Duke against Miami, and surprisingly, Duke is not ranked right now, so go figure. And you've got number 24 Oklahoma facing off against number 10 Texas Tech. Moving in to your NBA schedule for tonight, you got Lakers Hawks, Hornets Heat, Timberwolves Cavs, Kings Pelicans, Knicks Bulls, Blazers Bucks, Rockets Thunder, Suns Mavs, Grizz Spurs, Pistons Nuggets. And finally, closing out, the opponents have been released for the Eagles, and it's just backtracking a little bit. Opponents for the Eagles in the upcoming season. The home games, of course, Dallas, New York, and Washington. Then they get the Saints, the Bucks, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the 49ers all at home. On the road, again, division rivals, Dallas, New York, Washington. They go to Atlanta, to Carolina, to Vegas to face off against the Raiders, to Denver, Mile High against the Broncos, and to Detroit to face off against the Lions. That, my friends, concludes this episode of the SportsRap Podcast right here on Heat 100 Radio. If you get into the link, the description on the group on Facebook, SportsRap Podcast, you will get the link, the secure systems link where you can tune in if you do not tune in through Facebook Live. As always, you can get me Instagram and Twitter at SportsRap_D. Facebook, like I just mentioned, SportsRap Podcast is the group page where you find all of your pertinent sports information. The webpage, sportsrapradio.com, YouTube, SportsRap TV, and the podcast is funneled to most of the places where you get your podcast. iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify. Check me out. Just search the SportsRap Podcast. Again, messy, sloppy day to day, snowy Monday. Be safe. Be great on purpose. Check me all week on social media and right back here each and every Monday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the SportsRap Podcast. Take care, folks. Enjoy your Monday.